until the legislation was filed on the Senate floor in early December, with now the magical, elusive deadline of Christmas Day. And so that would have meant we would have had about 3 weeks, which we did, to consider the legislation on the Senate floor, 1 week left, even then considering the Farm Bill, for example. When Ed Muskie was marking up the Clean Air Bill back in 1970, it took 49 days in the committee. The committee represents about a fifth of the Senate membership. But we virtually had no opportunity to modify it on the Senate floor as promised. We voted, considered 23 amendments, and there were 455. And yet the amendment process had shut down. So I argued against these arbitrary timelines. First, it was May that we were going to get it done, then it was June and July and August and September and October. Then it was by Christmas Day, and then it was by the State of the Union. I said, why not just focus on trying to get it right? Instead, we had the vote, as you know, at 7 a.m. or 1 a.m. in the morning, and it culminated with a vote on Christmas Eve Day at 7 a.m. to ram it through before that artificially contrived deadline on Christmas Day. So obviously, it raised the public skepticism and concerns about whether or not there was something to hide. And of course there was, as we learned of the agreement. And there were not the fundamental questions answered with respect to the legislation. Questions that you would have been asking if you were sitting around the table thinking about purchasing health insurance. What are the premiums? What are the co-pays? What are the deductibles? These are questions that I had submitted to the Congressional Budget Office in early December, because I thought rightfully before we voted on such legislation in monumental proportions that we certainly should have the answers to those questions. And rightfully everyone in the United States Senate should have answers to those questions. What will be the cost to small businesses? What will be the cost of the lowest plan, the lowest and basic plan in the legislation? What will be the cost to the average American? What will drive up the premiums and what will bring down the premiums? But unfortunately, we did not have the answers to those basic questions. The point is, it became deal-making over bridge building. Could have been done differently? Yes. Can it be done differently now? Yes. There are things we could do tomorrow that would work. Legislation that I co-authored across party lines that would open the doors again for small businesses, allow you to purchase those plans across state lines, to purchase a panoply of options in state and regional-based exchanges. That would drive down the prices, particularly as you know that you would face year after year double-digit increases. That could happen tomorrow. It's most especially important to really pursue initiatives that are going to affect the well-being of small businesses. Because after all, we're depending on that one sector of the economy, all of you as small business owners, to lead us out of the way of this historic downturn. So we need to provide you the much critical relief, whether it's on health insurance costs or whether it's on tax policy in Washington. The point is that we need to evaluate everything that we do, every issue that we vote on, every initiative that is taken, and how it's going to affect small businesses, how it's going to affect job creation. I have proposed, for example, a jobs impact statement, one where the legislation would have to be evaluated and determined on the basis of whether or not it creates jobs, it loses jobs, or preserves jobs. In Washington, we have to create policies where there's a cause and effect, and we have to understand the net effect of everything that we do. We have to be supremely aware of whether or not we're affecting the ability for small businesses and businesses across the spectrum to create jobs in America at a time in which we desperately need it. And I think that there's a glimmer of hope for the prospects of building some support on a bipartisan basis for a jobs bill that we will be considering this week. And it was important for the President to make as a centerpiece of his State of the Union address job creation and small business concerns, because certainly that will be a catalyst for generating consensus necessary for creating the types of jobs initiatives that can make a profound difference. It can't be any jobs package. It has to be one with workable economic models. And we have to start with certainty. As I mentioned this week in the Senate Finance Committee hearings with the Secretary of Treasury and the OMB Director, the business community needs certainty. I said, would you take the risk? Have you heard about the potential policies emanating out of Washington these days? It's most important that we have assurances that the 2001 tax cuts are not going to expire, that are going to affect small businesses. It's critically important that we have the permanency of expensing, which I proposed in the stimulus plan, up to $250,000 that expired at the end of 2009. It declines this year to $134,000. But it should be made permanent at $250,000. We also should make sure that we have a 50% bonus depreciation, allowing businesses to write off their investments in capital improvement. The President mentioned in the State of the Union address legislation that I and Senator Kerry have introduced that will allow zero capital gains rates on investment in small business stock that's held for 5 years starting in 2010. In the stimulus package, I was able to secure increases in the guarantee rates for small SBA loans, as well as reducing or eliminating lenders' fees. That has had a profound impact on increasing lending in the SBA programs, 90% nationwide, and more than 270% here in the state of Maine. But we need to do more. We need to expand the size of those loans from $2 million to $4 or $5 million, as I have heard here in Maine. And the President has recommended that in the State of the Union address, and I hope that it will be a part of the jobs package, and the one that we'll either be considering next week and in the forthcoming weeks. There will be other small business packages that will incorporate those initiatives. There will also be a payroll tax holiday for employers, share the employees' contribution for Social Security, another way of encouraging the hires of new workers. But most importantly, it is critical that we create the right kind of climate upon which you can depend to take that calculated risk. And that means having certainty in the types of policies that are coming from Washington upon which you can depend. And I think that that message has resonated within the halls of Congress and with the President, that we will work mightily to do what we need to do to turn this economy around in a modest and a practical way. And how we pay for it becomes paramount as well. Now, some have suggested using the TARP funds, the funds that we use for the bank stabilization program. But that money was intended to be loans to the banks to be repaid, not to be spent. So if you use those funds, that will only be adding to the deficit. I have proposed using the unallocated, the unspent stimulus. We've only expended $269 billion of the $778 billion. As I mentioned to the Secretary of the Treasury this week, stimulus is intended to be timely, targeted, and temporary.